Yeah. Okay. First thing is, up until a few years ago, there actually were some rules and regulations which controlled the behavior of amateur radio operators, in that they weren't allowed to swear and they weren't allowed to do what they called superfluous language. The use of superfluous language, which covered a lot of things. And not be harassed and bothered. So we want to instill a camaraderie, which the amateurs have been quite famous for decades. But it's a little more difficult now with those rules gone, because the ones who only follow rules and like doing things that they can get away with, they're growing in number. So I just want to point out the advantages of behaving on the radio. They far outweigh clowning around like doing some of the other dance. So, as I was saying, some operators may choose to ignore all or some of these recommendations, and that's their choice. But I can guarantee you that they won't have as much fun as the ones who go by it. So, there are some standard protocols that amateurs have usually followed through the years, and they worked them out by trial and error. And the idea is to come up with a procedure, a method, a kind of a rule of the road kind of thing, to keep everybody from getting upset with everyone else while they're trying to have fun with their hobby. So we have kind of like a code of ethics, and it's been developed, and it's been highly instrumental in providing amateurs with an orderly and dependable means of communication for both casual chatter and for the technocrats. So we want to maintain a relatively clean, orderly communications with a minimal amount of interference to other stations. So there's a golden rule that if you follow this rule, you probably won't even need to know all the other details. It's basically this: if it's not courteous, then it should not be said or done using amateur radio.
Absolutely.
And a good thing to remember is that a thoughtful amateur will never engage in petty arguments or berate another operator on the air. That's what the phone's for.
Cell phone?
Cell phone or whatever, yeah. Not on a ham radio. So if you feel it's necessary to do so, you should meet with or telephone the person. Don't use the radio. As I mentioned, although the prohibitions regarding the use of profane and offensive language have been removed, these practices are unlikely to be tolerated by other amateurs, and it won't help you in increasing your popularity within the amateur radio community. So, amateur radio is not a replacement for citizen band radio, or CD as some people call it, or general radio service. It's not intended for use by the general public. It is restricted to individuals who have attained a degree of understanding of radio and regarding the theory and operation of radio station. That's why you did your test, to show that you have a little more savvy about what's going on to use the radios in a more intelligent manner. Now, to aid in the organization, because we have so many different types of modes and so many neat things you can do in amateur radio, if everybody tried to do all these same things on the same frequency, an argument and fight would break out, because some of these modes are not compatible. Like, you can't send a CW carrier while somebody throws digital on the same channel. It's just going to be interference. So what we have is, over the years, the hams have worked out kind of a segregated breakup of each band. It's called a band plan, and it's a voluntary gentleman's agreement, and it works quite well. We have certain areas where we say, okay, if you're going to operate in Morse code, you should operate in this area if you can. That doesn't mean you can't go somewhere else, but you should try and keep it over here or close to there, so that people that don't want to have CW on their communications, they'll go somewhere else. And then we have a section for voice, and then we have another section in the middle, usually for a combination of CW, digital, and other modes. And then usually further at the top of the band, some of the people that like the older type radios, like the old radios, kind of like your CB radio's AM radio, where you have a continuous carrier and modulation. That doesn't go well with sideband, so they usually try and keep that at the top of the band. And there are not that many of them, but they are there. So this is to prevent somebody from just saying, oh, well, I'm just going to have a voice conversation in the middle of the CW band. And it's going to get them, people are going to be pretty upset, because that's where they're listening for their DX and CW, and they're expecting to get the CW contacts. And the same thing, you don't want CW in the middle of a phone band, because nobody wants to listen to while they're trying to talk. So this is what they have, is they have this structure. You can get this off the web, several different places. Just type in Canadian Band Plan or go to the rac.ca website, and they'll show you their version of the band plan. There's one for every band, and they differ slightly between the American and Canadian. It has to do with their privileges, but they essentially go together. So now there are two basic types of operation when you get into your higher frequency bands. Or it's confusing, they call HF high frequency and VHF very high frequency and UHF, but UHF and VHF is higher than HF. So when I say we're going into the higher frequency bands, we're moving up in frequency. So the one that everyone's probably starting with is VHF UHF, the 2-meter band. And there are basically two modes of operation that you're going to be using your radios in, either simplex or duplex. Now, simplex is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. So you key your radio, you talk, and the person hears you on the other end listening to the same frequency, and they have to wait until you're done, and then they can key their radio and they will talk on the same frequency again, and they'll hear you. So you can't talk at the same time. And this is usually radio to radio. So whatever your radios are capable of communicating between, that's your range. And it's usually more or less short. Like two handhelds, you're probably only going to talk about 2-3 miles, maybe 5 miles if you're lucky. Two mobiles, 15-20 miles. Bases, maybe more. It just depends on what combination. Because each receiver has to hear the other person, and the other transmitters have to be able to make it to the other person's receiver. The second mode is called duplex. In duplex, you're transmitting on one frequency, and then you're receiving on the other. Now, repeater systems operate this way. There's two types of duplex. There's full duplex and half duplex. What I mean by half duplex is, again, same as your simplex. While your radio is transmitting, you can't hear anyone talking to you. So you are transmitting on one frequency, and then when you let go, your radio switches to another frequency to receive the signal. Now, this is because you're going through a repeater system. Up on a hill somewhere is a repeater that can simultaneously receive and transmit on two separate frequencies. So the repeater listens on the input frequency for anyone that wants to talk through the repeater, and the mobile or whatever device that's using the repeater transmits on the input frequency. The repeater immediately retransmits that signal on the other frequency, which your radio is automatically switched to when you let go of your key on your radio to listen. The advantage of this is now you're not limited in your range. You could have two 100 milliwatt walkie-talkies located 5 miles away and a repeater up on a hill, and you could effectively talk to other stations 30 or 40 miles away, just like you were there. Because the repeater is a better receiver, is a better transmitter, so it basically piggybacks your signal. That's the advantage of the repeater system. It can do a wide area coverage, and you can do almost like Dick Tracy wrist radios to do it with. And we have those now too, whether it's a company called Elinco, maybe brought those out a few years ago. I haven't seen them around lately. I guess they didn't catch on. But they were wrist 2-meter radios. Designed to work with repeaters in town. They're out there. talked about repeaters. We got that part. Okay, now, again, we're talking certain types of transmissions are not compatible. If your repeater is listening on one frequency and transmitting on another, those frequencies are established in the area. So that means if you want to pick a frequency to talk on, you don't want to be talking on either one of those frequencies. Because if you operate on simplex on the input, everything you say will be going over the repeater, but you won't know it because you won't be listening to the output, but everybody else will know. And if you transmit on the output, anybody that's in your range will hear you interfere with anything that comes off the repeater, but again, you won't know it because you'll be out of the range of. When you operate a repeater, you always have to go to the duplex mode. Now, repeaters are typically using a plus and minus 600 hertz offset, which means that the transmit and the receive frequency are 600 kilohertz away, plus or minus typically. There is a convention that in the higher portion of the 2 meter band, and the 440 as well, that you add 600K. And in the lower portion, you subtract 600K. This is usually followed, but sometimes not. But you can find these frequencies, again, in the local information we have on the website here in town. You can find listings of repeaters. You can buy books of the whole international repeater community. It'll tell you the frequencies and so on and so forth. Now, to avoid interference and to give you a nice quiet monitoring situation, a lot of repeaters use filters which are called subtones. What they do is that the equipment has to be set in the subtone mode, which you'll have when you buy your radios. You'll see tone modes: transmit and receive, encoding. What this does is it transmits a low frequency tone. Some people can hear it, some can't, with your transmitter. The repeater is listening, and if it gets any signal that's on that frequency that doesn't have a tone, it won't repeat it. It'll ignore it, won't keep. What this does is this prevents the repeater from reacting to bits of noise from other transmitters or other things going around. So you don't have the repeater always going go every time it gets a static crash or a buzz that's close to the frequency. And also, for people that are monitoring their radios, they don't have to be listening to the repeater coming up every time there's a little bit of disturbance in the area. They're only going to hear what's coming through the repeater, what they want to hear. But in order to do that, you have to have both your receiver set to react only to tone, and the repeater has to be in the tone mode as well. And then nothing will open your squelch but the tone. Then some are digital. And in some cases, in some situations, you could actually program in a different tone. So you could listen, like you could add a digital tone onto a subtone repeater, and you could say you only wanted to listen for one particular station, and you had an agreement you're going to monitor, and you didn't want to listen to everything else that's going on in the repeater. So you would tell the person to call you and add this digital subtone, which is kind of like a quick little burst of data, and that's the only time your squelch is going to open up. So that's another feature you have in most of these radios. You can do that, and in order for you to hear it, the repeater will have to retransmit that and the little burst tone, and then your receiver looks for a tone and the burst before it opens the squelch. You can do that. You can also use digital tone instead of subtone to do communications. You can also enable the tones in simplex for yourself, although it's not done that much because most people. The hams don't really want to lock people out of their frequencies usually. They sort of want everybody to feel free that they can interrupt or say hello or whatever. If you put your tone in, then no, you won't. You just hear beeps. So I don't recommend for that reason. But they're great for repeaters and monitoring and stuff like that. Also, your radios have a specific bandwidth, so they're only so selective. And if you pick a frequency that's too close to a repeater input or output, you can sometimes cause interference even though you're not aware of it. So it's a good idea to stay a little bit away from inputs and outputs of repeaters because it could cause problems that way. And also, if you have a friend on, say, 14658, it's not really a good idea to go to 146.5. Well, let's see, what 15. You can go short, small as 5 kilohertz increments if you want. So, 585, you could tune your radio for that, but you'd mess up his communications. You don't want to operate that close to somebody else. So you want to keep that in mind too, or else you get splatter adjacent. Now, as far as common courtesies or practices, one thing we don't do in the amateur radio is we do not use the term break or breaker. Okay? We don't use it. The only time we use break is in an emergency. So if somebody goes break, it means you have something very important to say that is, can't wait, has to be done now. Car's overturned, you need help, that kind of thing. We don't do the breaker stuff here. Okay? If you want to interrupt somebody, you just throw in your call. Like guys talking along and they just go V3RET. And they go, oh, hi Alan, how you doing? Good. I'm on the conversation. That's all you need to do. If you're monitoring the repeater for periods of time, you may occasionally hear somebody come up out of the blue and they'll say, oh, it's just a kind of a habit that people do, and it's some people like it. I like it myself. What it does is, it's just a quick little announcement. Yes?
I have a question.
Yes.
This break, is it allowed on CW? When you want to break in for somebody talking?
Get to CW. CW is a different they have a different protocol.
Yeah, but it's allowed. Still.
Yes,
allowed.
you
Okay.
can use it. Yes,
Okay.
but CW is a different animal in a couple ways.
Don't just open it up to swearing, so I'm imagining that anything goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't say break though.
Yeah. Well, as I said, they can swear if they want to, but we don't want them to.
Say break.
So, where is that way then? Okay. So this is just allows. So say for instance, I didn't have my radio on, and 3 or 4 people were looking for me, and all of a sudden, I come on. I turn my radio on, and I don't know they've been looking for me. So first thing I usually do on my radio, I just say V3RET monitoring. Anybody that was wondering where I was or might have wanted to call me, they'll call me at that time. I kind of say, well, here I am, guys, in case you're looking for me. But if no one answers, you won't hear any further response. That's the end of it. You can go ahead and use the repeater. It's not, someone hasn't tied it up. That's all it is. As far as calling a station, the established simplest method of calling a station is to call the call sign of the person that you are calling. It's like if I was calling Mike, I'd go V3 MHL, VE3RET, and your call sign after it. Or you could say this is, you can develop your own kind of caricature how you want to do things. Some people use phonetics. Victor Echo 3, Romeo Echo Tango. Some people like to do that sometimes. You just need to use their call sign once and your call sign once. You don't have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating, because this is FM, and if they don't hear you the first time, they're not there. FM is very clear and sharp. But if they are hard of hearing, maybe you could repeat it twice. V3MHL, V3MHL. This is V3RET. How's that? Yeah. You usually get a response within 10 to 20 seconds if they're on the frequency. Now at that point, if you finished your call, you could say your call and say clear the frequency, which some people do, or you could just not make a call, and people just naturally, after 15 to 20 seconds, they assume the frequency is clear, and that person will call. Myself, I don't announce I'm clear. To me, that's using extra time on the repeater that I don't need to know. It just means more time someone's got to wait before I come off out of their hair, so to speak. And if you get 10 and 20 stations using the repeater right after another, and all waiting for them to clear, well, that's double the traffic on the repeater. Not really necessary, but it's up to you how you want to do it. General call stall stations. Say you go to an area and you want to find the local hams. You just go on to a frequency where you want to make your call. You can do this on HF as well, and you just you use the CQ, which is the standard calling procedure for calling general stations. Usually 3 times, CQ, CQ, CQ. This is VE3 RET. You might say the second time if you wanted to. You might add phonetics, and just wait. And if somebody wants to talk to you, they'll come back, they'll say your call sign, and they'll say yours, and then you'll start your conversation. Now, repeater systems, because they're shared, sometimes, especially in a busy area, it's not a good idea to just talk on the repeater on and on and on, especially if you don't need to. Say you use a repeater to get somebody because they're monitoring their repeater frequency, but you know that you can talk to them on simplex because they're within your simplex range. You should move off the repeater as soon as you can and go to simplex. Then that leaves the repeater open for other people, and you have another channel. But if you can't, and you still need to have your communication, it's okay to use the repeater. If someone really needs it, they'll interrupt. Now, another thing about repeater, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Purple Crystal Award.
I got it once.
You got it once.
I got it once. Yeah.
Repeaters have a safety function because they don't want to burn out the transmitters. They have a timer on them. And if somebody keeps the repeater keyed and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks without letting go of the key, the repeater times out, shuts down, and the repeater doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
There's usually a time frame before it comes back on the air. So that's called timing out the repeater, and those that time out the repeater are referred to have won the Purple Crystal Award. It's something you don't want to do. So try and keep your transmissions under a minute or so.
I think I was telling him all about the ham courses, you see, and this went on too long. And, yeah, they blew the transmitter.
That'll happen. Phone patches. Some repeaters have phone patches. Now what this is it allows you to make a phone call through the repeater system. It's interconnected with the telephone lines. And they have regular patches and they have reverse phone patches. A regular patch, you just go to the frequency that you want to use. You would announce your call sign, VE3 RET for the patch. Wait a second, no one's using the repeater. You'd activate the patch with the protocol codes which are published. Once you get used to the repeater, you'll know the codes. And then you'll get a dial tone, and you'll dial your number, and it'll go through, and you'll be able to talk to somebody back and forth on a regular telephone who doesn't have a radio. That's good in one respect, but the thing you got to watch for is because this is the big wide world, people sometimes get a little over familiar on their telephones, and they start using that kind of language that we don't want on the radio. So if that should occur, and the guy starts cursing off or whatever, you're going to remind them. First thing is when you call them, immediately remind them that they're on a phone patch. Everything they say is being heard by hundreds of people. Okay, so if that doesn't calm them down, you know. But anyway, that's what you want to do. Now, if something should happen in your conversation and the guy starts going wild or whatever, the best thing to do is just terminate the patch, close it down, and just give a quick little apology to anybody. Oh, sorry about that, guys. You know, and that's it. Nobody will be upset. Nobody will throw darts at you in the next coffee meeting. It'll be fine.
He'll be mad because you hung up on him.
Then you can call him and explain to him that that's the way it goes. And if that's not a problem, if that's a problem, don't call that person again on the patch. Now, there's also a reverse phone patch capability. That one takes a little bit more thought before you want to use that. What that will allow you to do is from any telephone, you will be able to call the repeater and place a call to someone on the radio. You institute it from any telephone. That's another way that can work. Again, you have the access codes for that and so on and so forth. Same rules, although it'll be on your end with the cursing and swearing most likely, because the guy on the radio will probably behave himself, probably. But again, you're in control, you're responsible. If you shut it down, if you think it's gotten out of run. Yes.
If you call a repeater, you will have to be an amateur with a call sign, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So you won't have the codes. You're not giving out codes to non-amateurs. Yeah.
So your wife can't.
No, they can't. Okay. Got that. Okay. Now, also, a lot of these repeaters have other features, which you may or may not have been allowed to use, but they can be triggered by certain combinations of touch tones once the repeater's operating. And it's not too hard to figure out the code that starts it all. So the golden rule is, if you don't know what you're doing and you haven't given permission to use those features, don't play with your touchpad to find out what they do, because you'll end up shutting down the repeater or causing a problem, and then you'll be on somebody's list. And if it's really bad, you'll be on our list.
What award do you get for that?
Okay?
No spectacles award.
License suspension. Oops. Fines.
Candid investigation.
Yes.
Advance, I would say.
If and when. So the rule is, don't play with repeater control tones. This should never be transmitted to a repeater unless you've been authorized to do so by the repeater sponsor. Serious damage, malfunctions, or the deactivation of the repeater could be the result. If you don't know, ask. Again, as I mentioned here, it's illegal for any, or it's sorry, Karen, I go this now. The advanced features on repeaters, that's what it is. Okay. Some repeaters have features that can only be used by advanced operators. So if you're not an advanced operator, it's up to you to know what you're allowed to do. For example, some repeaters can be linked into other frequency bands by commands. If you don't have HF privileges, you can't use a VHF to HF repeater. Your call sign can, the rule is, your call sign must not be heard on a frequency that you don't have authority to operate on. I don't care how it gets there, it's not to be there. So remember that it's illegal for any operator to utilize frequencies, modes, or technical parameters outside of those authorized for your class of certificate.
Can't be trash talking around higher frequencies.
Can't get there.
Okay, self-policing. The band is going to be as useful as everybody makes it. So, amateur radio operators are subject to rules and regulations and policies governing the use of amateur radio service. The amateur community is, for the most part, self-policing. So, it's not uncommon for one amateur to remind another that they're violating regulations or engaging in discourteous behavior. If the shoe fits, just wear it politely. Don't do it again. Just don't get upset. Because next time you might want to do the same thing to someone else. And in the annals of amateur radio, it's considered to be an honorable thing to offer constructive criticisms or guidance to an amateur who's engaged in illegal or discourteous behavior. All amateurs are encouraged to assist one another and to provide and accept courteous criticism. Operators that don't respond to such guidance should be brought to the attention of the local amateur community. There's safety in numbers. And in case of a serious breach, you can let the government know about it. Never argue over the air with an uncooperative operator. You will only escalate the problem, and you'll endanger your own certificate, your privileges, and your reputation. Isn't worth it. If you really want to tell them off, use one of my favorite phrases. I'm sorry, I love to sit here and listen to this, but I bought a new can of paint and I can't wait to watch it dry. And then just turn it off. See it, right? Make your point. Now, if we don't do this, if we let the band deteriorate and we just do what we want to do, here's what's going to happen. I can tell you this from experience, and I can tell you this because of where I work and what goes on. Greedy commercial interests would like nothing better than to get their hands on our frequencies. Okay? And we have to continue to prove that we're capable and worthy of retaining those privileges. It's in everyone's best interest to operate their stations in a legal, orderly, and courteous manner at all times. And technical support. If you should have a problem with your equipment and need assistance with interference problem, help with an installation or repair, or just need general advice regarding the operation of your station, the amateur community has a lot of people out there that know this stuff. They've done it, they've grown up with it. So don't be afraid to ask around and get some help. You know, the technical nature of the hobby, there are many operators that possess considerable expertise. You'd be surprised who you'll find on the amateur radio. We've got movie stars, we've got engineers, we've got astronauts, we've got presidents, queens, princes, dictators, KGB. Everybody is out there. And there's some very smart people out there. Broadcast engineers. There's a guy in England, retired, he's a retired communications engineer. He single-handedly built, designed an entire fleet of digital HF, VHF, UHF radios, and a protocol to use them, which is open protocol, any hams can get it. These things are works of art. I can give you the website to look at it. You can buy the circuit boards and the list of parts. You can actually build these things and run them, and they're as good or better than anything you can buy in the market. This guy is no fool. Okay. Very interesting stuff. If you can think of it, somebody's either trying to build it right now or has built it already, and there's plans for it or something. There's someone out there. There's someone out there that can help you. You know? So don't be afraid to ask. And that's all I have for protocol. How much time do we have left before our break?
Oh, 20 minutes.
Okay. I want to show you. I'm going to bring up something on the screen here and just show you the band plan for 2 meters and the frequency layouts. See if I can get that out.
And Alan, there's one thing I would like clarified for the students, and that is
Yes?
signal reports on the repeater.
Signal reports on the repeater.
Most people, because they're used to HF,
Yeah.
and they want to do a 599 and
Oh.
on the repeater, and
Well, it's always going to be 599.
Yeah.
It's either noisy or quiet, depending on the source. If the person's barely getting into the repeater, then they're just barely making it. They're in the weeds. So they're not being heard. But the repeater will always transmit at the same signal level. So as far as the level of signal that you receive, that's not going to change from one station to the other because you're always listening to the same transmitter.
that's right. So I think the official thing to say is that if somebody asks for a signal report on a repeater, you just say full quieting.
Yeah,
There's
full
it's
quieting is
not
the
like
term, yeah.
HF where you say 599 or 57,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. You just say full quieting.
And you can embellish and say modulation's a little weak or it's overpowered.
Or like me, they say the tone is bad.
Yeah, the tone is bad. Yes. What you will notice occasionally, this is just something in case that you'd be surprised how many people don't know what this is. You're listening to a repeater, and they're talking away, and somebody starts talking, and all of a sudden you start hearing this little. Every now and then the repeater goes, oh, 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 and it seems to be triggered by somebody's voice. They're talking away, and then they hit a certain frequency or something, and then you hear. Oh, 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 oh. What that is some repeaters don't have a really good tone filtering system. It's kind of wide banded, and it responds to the harmonics of human voices that come close to the pure tones. And that particular frequency that is triggering this is triggering the command mode on the repeater. What happens is when you're going to do into a command mode for a repeater system, there's one key you hit that says listen up, I'm sending you a control code. This isn't a number, this isn't just a simple command. I'm sending you a specific control code. The repeater answers back with 3 tones, says I'm ready for the control code. So what is happening is, and the repeater's always listening for this, unless you turn the feature off. So a repeater that doesn't use advanced features will have this turned off, but some of them do. And particularly our local repeater 9.4 will do this a lot during the net. You've probably all heard it. You always wonder what that little sound was that comes up. Certain people's voices trigger it. Boom, 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 and then it comes back. That's what it is. Their frequency of their voice just happens to be the right tone for the repeater to falsely interpret that as a command prompt. If you listen for it tonight, you'll probably hear it several times. Now that you know what to listen for.
So singing about a C sharp.
Yeah, it's hard to say the actual tone on it. People with sharp voices usually trigger it. Women particularly.
Yeah.
And there's a couple operators that trigger it all the time. But I don't want to point any fingers. It's not their fault if their voice is in a certain frequency range.
Should have picked a different frequency.
You could talk with a rag over their mouth. Anyway, just that, if you ever wonder that, that's what it is. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get the van plan up here. I get control here. Not doing it very well, is it? Where are you?
It's there. It came out. Where the heck is it?
I don't see it
It's
anymore.
out there a little while ago.
Am I too far away from it or what?
No,
It
no,
used to
no.
work.
No, here it is. There it is. You just have to move very. There it is over there. Just don't move it very much.
Look at that. That's terrible. I never did that before.
Ah, there it is.
Okay. All right. Here we
You
go.
can't move this one very much.
Okay, so I need to get to here.
Yes. there.
And
bring up
then I
your-
need to get to, where is it?
Should be there. Data network. Where is it?
Where is my drive?
Data
I
D.
plugged it in, it should be there.
Data D.
Can't
No.
be D.
No.
No, that's not D.
I'll go plug it out and plug it in again.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, there you go, Giselle. Take it out and put it back. There it is.
Okay.
Kingston, there it is. Kingston.
That's it? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. That's all this stuff.
That's whatever's on Kingston.
Yeah. There's a bunch of images on here. Where is it now? All images. Here.
If you don't have my picture.
Tight. Come on. Come on.
We want just the.
It's not a JPEG. It's a.
It's IMG. I don't know what it is.
That should be it. That's the one I put in. That's the drive. I saved it to that. Why is it being stubborn?
So what's the file you're looking for?
It's a Word file.
A Word.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It should come up in Word then. You should see a Word icon, not an image icon here.
Exactly.
Oh, you're going through them now. There we go. Oh, there's 2 words.
That is. That's what I want. This thing's not very friendly to me.
Can I? Maybe if you used it on this thing, maybe if you used it on your.
No, I think it's the distance.
Oh, the distance. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm just on the.
Because you have the adapter plugged in on front, not the back.
Could be.
Oh, here's the band plan. See?
Yeah. Okay. Here's just a general, like the 2 meter band plan. I told you that certain sections of each band plan has been dedicated to certain kinds of operation. So this is just a general, the 144 to 148 frequency range for our 2 meter band plan. So they have some loose affiliations for where special modes should be operated. If you're going to try these modes, you should go to these frequency areas first. So you have the different ones here, like if you're going to use Morse code, they should keep that between the 144.06 to 144.1. and single sideband. Look at another section here too. EME is Earth, Moon, Earth. Everybody knows what that is? That's a kind of a
Moon bounce.
yeah, it's a, what would you call it? Aficionados. It's something that not everybody gets into, but some people get a kick out of bouncing a signal back to the moon and waiting for it to come back.
How many minutes?
I don't know. You might have done it.
I didn't do
I'm
it.
not one of those, but anyway, it's there. It's
Roy Brocklebank did it.
Yes, they have such big fancy antennas and everything. They'll bounce signals off the moon. Propagation beacons. These are automatic systems that run all the time. The person could tune in and say, gee, I wonder if I'd be able to talk to Sault Ste. Marie tonight, check for the beacon. Yeah, I can hear the beacon, chances are I can get into the repeater. They're not so much popular in the higher bands. They're more popular in HF bands where the propagation shifts more. Weather can greatly affect it, and your E and H layers they move around a lot through the different ionospheric effects, and it's more pronounced on HF. CSI national calling frequency. Yes. The 144-200 is where if you had a single sideband and you were looking for someone to talk to, just generally, you'd go to 144-200 and you operate your single sideband VHF unit and call for somebody. CQ, 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 this is, and chances are they come on there and they'll probably move you to another frequency in the range. Oscar, that's a satellite system, uses a portion of the 2 meter band when it comes over. It transmits on one frequency, receives on the other. So this is an area that if you want to listen to that satellite, you go in that frequency range. Repeater inputs. We try to keep the inputs away from the outputs because that way you don't have a repeater output and input close by and they can cause problems with each other. So we try to keep them separate. Simplex operations, that's outside the repeater. We have 2 general areas in the band where we recommend that you can find simplex operations too. That doesn't mean you have to, but if you operate in those, chances are you're not going to run into any problem messing up with any repeaters because nobody puts repeaters in that area. Packet radio, some of you are familiar with that. We have a few frequencies for that as well. Your repeater outputs further up here. And some experimental modes, people that want to play with stuff that no one else has. Yeah, there's where you go. Oscar again, and then repeater inputs in the higher portion. And we have some more up here, another 2 more areas for simplex operations in the higher portion of the band, and then some more repeater inputs for, and then you don't see repeaters up here usually unless it's a really congested area and they've run out of the lower frequencies and they want to get another repeater and want to shoehorn it in, they'll go to the top. Because the closer you get up to here, the more chance you're going to interfere with private commercial systems. So no one wants to go up there unless they have to. This is just a general layout of some of the repeaters that are in the area. It's not a complete list by any means. These are just some of the United States repeaters. Notice that they're either plus or minus 600 hertz, typically. Sometimes you'll get odd ones, but 600 is typical. And some of them use subaudible tones. If you don't have those tones, you won't be able to key up the repeater. You'll just be interfering with the operations. They'll hear you, you won't hear them. Now what I did is I broke it up a little bit more, and this I think this will be on the website, color coded it kind of thing. I wanted to show you what the expanded band would look like and how close the different frequencies are in the area. So if you walk up this thing, you start to see, for instance, in Manitoulin Island, this is the output frequency for the D-star repeater. In Hayden, Ontario, it's the input. So these are frequencies that you don't want to operate simplex on in this area. You're going to interfere with these systems. And you should stay a couple channels away from them. So this just sort of helps you know how the band's laid out, where it's a good idea to transmit, where not to. And it varies between different areas because they're all different. In some areas it gets kind of intense. Their frequencies are getting close together. But since this one's in Manitoulin Island and this one's in Pelston, they're not going to bother each other being very close. Because this one's going to be weak for this one and weak for that one. You can get away with it. But you wouldn't put them on the same frequency. That could be a problem. Sudbury against. You can have 3 of them right here, real close. But they're not going to bother each other because they're far enough away.
Question for, so for another geographic area, they could have the
Totally different
similar, all the same bands, but they would be operating their own
Yes,
repeaters
you
and
might
whatnot.
they might reuse a lot of these frequencies,
Yeah.
but there'll be other systems, and they might use different tones as well. So you'll need to know those tones and the repeater for the area that you're going to operate. For instance, now you see here, this is the Simplex area,
Yeah.
but you'll notice we got an input. Somebody decided to put an input frequency in the middle of the Simplex band. That's because it's Sudbury, it was crowded. They got together and they said, well, we're going to miss one frequency. What's better, having one less Simplex or having a repeater that covers an area we don't have to cover? They all got together and said, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do it. There's no law against it. Nobody tells you what frequency you can use. It's just courtesy and practicality. You'll see this the odd time, not that often. Again, you see how they can spread them out. They usually try and keep them fairly apart, unless they're a long ways away. You see in this particular section, they alternate between digital and simplex, because digital is very narrow banded, and in some places they can get fairly close without causing problems. But a typical system, your normal repeaters and that, they're not narrow band. So if somebody operates here, chances are he's going to interfere with you, and you're going to interfere with him. Maybe not him because he's going to have tight filters because he's digital, but he's going to interfere with you. So it's a better idea to go to the next channel. And again, you see that there's not a lot of use here. It's not the favorite place to be. It's too close to the pagers and stuff and cause problems. Like the paging band starts right about here, and pagers are notorious for being on for long periods of time and putting on onerous stuff like that. And if it starts to overload your receivers, it'll drive you nuts. Your radio's crazy. So we try and stay away from this band area as much as possible for those reasons. And that's it in a nutshell.
So just because 420 sounds cool, it's not the best place to play.
No. And this happens to be the 2 meter band. There's one of these for every of one of the bands. There's one for 440. I haven't written it up yet for the area, but it'll be along the same lines. You'll see where things are. Now I don't know if anybody's done what I've done here in this level of detail to show you how the layout of it, whether you'll find that online or not. But they will tell you the ranges in repeater inputs here, simplex there, kind of thing. But I wanted to show you what it looks like in the real world, so you get an idea.
Well, you were talking about it, and I was thinking, well, hasn't somebody created something like this? And then you come up and show it. Well, there it is.
Yeah. Any questions? Huh? Looks like break time.
Yep.
Then Mikey can enamor you with the digital world.